I was always like focused on the security aspect, even though, there was no such thing as cybersecurity, 40 years ago. It was just something I always looked towards. It was what I always wanted to do. So, when I was working through IT, and talking about how we can do security and securing our networks. And people just thought I was crazy, and even, you talk to 1 million people in IT and you'd have very few people, talking about cybersecurity.
You're listening to Protect It All, where Aaron Crow expands the conversation beyond just OT, delving into the interconnected worlds of IT and OT cybersecurity. Get ready for essential strategies and insights. Here's your host, Aaron Crow.
Awesome. Hey, thank everybody for joining me on another episode of Protect It All podcast. If you're watching, or even if you saw the title, you obviously know who I'm talking to today. So, with all that, there may be some folks out there that don't know who you are, Mike. So please, first of all, thank you for being here. Second of all, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and a little bit about your background and how you got into this crazy thing called OT.
Sure. Yeah. No, thanks for having me back, Garrett. It's good to see you and get to catch up. So, I'm Mike Holcomb. I really focus on helping people learn about OT and ICS cybersecurity. So it's really about whether it's people like myself coming from an IT cybersecurity background that want to get into the world of protecting critical infrastructure, or if it's working with engineers and PLC techs and other folks that are already in the plants today running operations on a daily basis, but they want to understand, well, how do I secure these things from cyber attack? Or folks that, lead programs and they're either just getting started. And that that could be a really large environment, a very small environment, everything in between. And then those that have a program, but they just kind of feel like they're stuck. Maybe, and they need to get unstuck and know, where to go next, where it makes sense for them. So that's, focus on a lot, I guess, when you look at it that way, but it's really about, helping people, just learn more in OT and ICS cybersecurity, kind of no matter, where they come from or what they're doing today. And then I have a small boutique shop, which pretty much just me, myself, and I, where I try to do, some field work, at least each month. And I do different speaking engagements and, of course, build training and do some private training for companies and entities. I was just actually out, in LA, where I got to work with like 50 of, some of the largest water districts in California and some of the smaller ones as well, and everything in between, and started working with some of those folks, as well. So, which is really exciting because water was, just not one of those, probably about the only sector I didn't get to work in that much in my last role, because we did everything in engineering, but my only water was limited to, what you see in power plants or data centers, and, not dedicated like water treatment, and wastewater facilities. So I was really excited to have that opportunity. So
that's awesome.
It's a little bit about me, and I do stuff on LinkedIn and YouTube. So,
well, the funny thing is, as I get people reaching out and hey, how do I get into cybersecurity? How do I get into OT? How do I learn? And from all those, kind of avatars that you just mentioned earlier, I brag about the OT industry, and it's fairly small, but there's a lot of folks that are really amazing and love to help. And you're one of the people I point them at as, hey, go check out Mike. Follow him on LinkedIn, look at his YouTube, look at the training things that he's posting. Like that's so critical. It's the same reason why I do this podcast, right? Like I want to get the knowledge out there. I think we both see this from a value add to, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, however you want to say that, right? I want my electricity to work, and I know that we need more and more people in the industry to protect the critical things, our water, our transportation, our electricity. And we just don't have enough training and knowledge transfer going on in the OT side of the world. And there's so many of us that are also going to be retiring, people that have been in the industry for 30, 40 years of OT before they called it that. But there isn't this, there's not enough on, in people coming into the industry to be able to take all the hats from the old timers they're going to be leaving in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I learned, this is working at my last company, which one of the world's largest engineering construction companies was, we had 4,000 electrical and control system engineers, right? And if talking with, I didn't work with every single one, but the majority in some way, shape, or form. Most went through some of my courses, internally that we had done. And there were probably less than 10 that really, really were passionate about OT or ICS cybersecurity, at least that I was aware of. We had a really strong, we had, over 30 folks on the IT cybersecurity team. And, there was one person on that team passionate about OT, ICS cybersecurity. And that was me, right? And that was how I was able to make that transition. And so, there's just not a lot of folks out there that are really interested or passionate or believe in the mission. And so and we need people from both of those, kind of backgrounds and coming together and working together to protect power and water and make sure we have food that's safe to eat on the table. Because it's few and far people come into OT cyber, even though it's something that we all rely on every single day of our lives. Yeah.
It's an interesting problem that we have, and I know we don't necessarily know the answers to these things, but interested to get your take on why do you think that is? Like, why do you think there's not more people that are interested, more people that are aware? I mean, we go to these conferences like RSA, obviously S4, everybody knows about OT, but you go to RSA, you go to Black Hat, and so many people have maybe heard of OT. They really can't define it. They really don't really have a grasp of exactly what it is. And they really have no real desire because everybody's going towards the IT, the AI, the cloud, all that kind of stuff. And there's just not this big like banner or billboard saying, hey, come over here. We need help here too.
Right. And for me, so I come from, an IT cybersecurity background. Since I was a little kid, all I wanted to do was something with computers. And I grew up with a, kind of typical hacker kitty. And so I was always like focused on the security aspect, even though, there was no such thing as cybersecurity, 40 years ago. It was just something I always looked towards. It was what I always wanted to do. So, when I was working through IT, and talking about how we can do security and securing our networks. And people just thought I was crazy, and even, you talk to 1 million people in IT and you'd have very few people, talking about cybersecurity. And it took, right? It was not only years, but it was decades, right? For a lot of bad things to happen before people really started to take it, pay attention. And even then, right, there's still a lot of people that work in IT that want nothing to do with cybersecurity. Sure. But then you also have those that say, hey, right, I believe in the mission. I want to protect our environments. I want to keep, the bad people out. I want to make sure our information and our systems, right, stay safe and they're up and running. And, like for me, I want to make sure nobody loses their job, because if our company got hit, right, could the company afford that? Right, most small, medium-sized businesses, they'll fold their doors in like 6 months, after even just a typical ransomware attack, and I would never want to see that. So it just takes a different mindset, and then there were some people that they just got into cyber because they wanted to make more money, and it's like, what, okay, if you can do the job, more power to you. But of course, the landscape is very different these days, and right, the market is flooded, and so it really is for the people that really believe in the mission, and they're going to stick to it. And then you only amplify that 1 million times for OT, and that it's still one of those. It's a it's a niche within a niche. It's a niche within a niche within a niche within a niche. Right? You really have to be believe in the mission wholeheartedly. There's you're going to probably be making less money than your IT counterparts. You're going to probably have more stress, more than likely, than your IT counterparts. You're probably going to have to work on site most of the time, unlike your, a lot of your IT counterparts, right? So there's there's just a lot of, when you look at it from that perspective, I'm not trying to dissuade anybody. we should be talking about all the great things, but it really is the people that come to OT security, really want to, believe in the mission, and protecting critical infrastructure, right? Making sure that our families, our friends, our communities, they have, the services that they use every second of every day in their lives, and that's really, I think, a big part of why it comes down to me. It doesn't matter where you live, right? I mean, we're in the US, but you could be in the middle of China or the middle of Russia, right? Or Iran, right? And we always think of these as, at least for like Americans, right? Our immortal enemies. But at the end of the day, we're all people and we just want to take care of our families. And you see the struggle, everywhere, across the globe, which is why I really appreciate LinkedIn and YouTube being global platforms. And you can, reach, so many people, around the world. Cause at the end of the day, we're just trying to take care of our family.
Well, and OT problems here are the same as very similar as they are everywhere, right? I think you've been on it. I've been on the ICS Arabia podcast, and, that obviously that's for, the Middle East but power plant's a power plant. It doesn't matter if it's sitting in Texas or if it's in Japan or yes, maybe there's some differences, but it's still the basic principles. I'm going to heat up some water, make some steam, turn a turbine, turn a generator, and that's power plant, right?
Yeah, create electricity. Yeah, it's always funny, and I've heard this joke multiple times, and I have, I still have clients with plants all around the world, and when you talk with the, or maybe like the CISO, he'll say, yeah, when we're in the United States and our plants, right, our number one job is always keeping the Chinese out of our plants. Of course, you go to our China plants, and our number one job is keeping the Americans out of the plants.
Right. Right.
Everybody does it. It's, of course, we always want to draw that line between, targeting critical infrastructure, that especially that would impact anybody in the public. So, which of course that brings up a whole other discussion these days, but, whether it's cyber or kinetic warfare, right? Nobody should touch critical infrastructure, period, the end. Even just watching, the Russians bomb, power infrastructure in the Ukraine continually, especially in the middle of winter with sub-zero temperatures. That just, it's
hard to justify any of that. Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah.
I know. And to your point though, right? And we see that, the analogy I always give is, in the States, we have hurricanes that come through. And when Katrina came through, New Orleans, like it was a third world country within a few days, right? Because there was no power, really no water, no electricity, no nothing, right? And all of a sudden you've got, people going door to door because they don't have any electricity. They don't have any food. Like you can't pump gas. Like everything stops. Like, just like that. And how quickly we go to my fridge doesn't work. Now the food in my fridge is bad. Now I don't have anything to eat. I don't have a can opener that I can use because my can opener is electric and I don't have any backup to run that. Like I can't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what do you do? Yeah. We had the hurricane came through here in Greenville, South Carolina, which we normally, it's like one of those once in a generation type things. And, we were actually out of town. My girlfriend and I were out of town. So we came back after like 2 days, and it was our apartment had power, but where the house I have where my daughters live, right? They're all adults, but they didn't have power for 10 days, and where my mom was, right? They didn't have power for 10 days, and it looked like those first 4, 5, 6 days, right? Everybody's barbecuing to take up all the frozen food in the freezer, and everybody's having a gale time, and then it's it come down to, I don't know, day 7, day 8, day 9. It was stretching, I think, people's tolerance and patience and kind of their goodwill, more than a little. Probably 2 weeks, it's when you start, to see the breakdown in society. So we're lucky that it came back, on 10 days. But those are the questions that we ask, in OT and ICS cyber is, what would happen if a cyber attack, brought down even part of the grid or the entire grid, right? And how would you even start to bring it back up, right? Because there is no coordinated team that that's responsible for that. So, yeah, right. Yeah. So we've seen kind of how, these types of situations can have impact, right? And then of course we don't have to look very far across other places on the planet where, there's real suffering because, these critical infrastructure there just doesn't exist the next day.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Heartbreaking.
It is. So as you start seeing, you're fortunate enough to be able to go and do these conferences and train folks and have people come to BSides and everything in between. Like, what do you see as the hurdles to get over, whether it be training somebody that's been in the industry, like you said earlier, in the IT space, or maybe they were operations, they were a plant person, to understand the OT, the cyber side of those things, or, hey, I'm new in the industry and I want to get into this. Like, what are those things that we can start fast tracking and making people have the knowledge and skill sets that we need to start filling some of these voids that we have on the enterprise side, but also helping people to understand, like, what is the path? How do I go? What is step A through Z to get me from where I am to where I'm trying to get to?
Yeah, for sure. There's just common themes that you see year after year. I'm sure you see them, all the time. It's, there's still a lack of awareness and education for leadership, right? There's still so many environments out there that still don't realize they need to do something about cybersecurity and their plans. It's like, wait, that's everybody, right? That's where you make your money. You probably would want to protect those. And it's like, well, we don't have those types of attacks in it. We do now. Colonial Pipeline, for almost 5 years ago, really changed a lot because every type of attacker out there knows OT is a thing. And right, they're either going to want to impact OT, right, the plant network or the IT network it's connected to that could also still have an impact on OT. So there's that lack of, awareness and education. If the leaders in the management team, they don't realize there's an issue, right? How are you ever going to get support? You're not, and I've been there and done that. And then of course, for the people that, want to be able to do the job and learn, more to get the skills and the knowledge, right? Then it's a matter of more, getting the education. And that's one of the reasons why I started posting on LinkedIn and YouTube. And it's mostly interesting because of folks at SANS like Rob Lee and Tim Conway and conversations with them, that I then started, doing LinkedIn and YouTube because, to get the information out because, all the folks at SANS are great, right? They're great classes. They're great people. You can learn so much, but they're also very expensive and not everybody, right? Most people don't have, $10,000 to take a class and an exam. They just don't. And so I've been very fortunate to be able to go through all of those. And same thing with the ISA, courses for 62443. But again, they're not as expensive as SANS and they're good classes. They have good content, but they're still $6,000-$7,000 to take all 4 classes that you have to take before you take the exams, and that the knowledge isn't getting out there. So so that was kind of my first foray into. I just wanted to create. When I started my first class was, hey, this is the class I wish I had, like before I went to the SANS, because I was so frustrated, right, trying to talk with people and learn about OT and ICS, cybersecurity. We didn't talk about OT right back then, but we had ICS or I got from an engineering company, so it was control systems. They always were like, "What's OT or what's ICS?" Oh, control systems. Sorry. Then they're like, "Oh, okay," or IACS, right? They get, So it's really about just those fundamentals and keeping it, just practical and simple. That was the best thing about the grid class, I remember, because Rob just takes, he's very good at taking very complex, complicated topics and breaking them down into very simple terms that anybody can understand. And you leave that class realizing, wow, this isn't as hard as I thought about. It's actually pretty darn straightforward. These are very complex and complicated environments we're protecting, but protecting them from cyber attack doesn't have to be complex or complicated. is always focus on the fundamentals. I always talk about, my big 5 controls is the basic approach. So I do backup and recovery. So it's not preventative, right? But every environment, just like in IT, it's going to get hit. So you need to be able to restore as quickly as possible, right? Do you have the right firmware file? Do you have the PLC logic backed up? Can you restore that system in a timely manner? Right. So backup and recovery. Then I do asset management because no, it's not fun and sexy to talk about, right? But at the end of the day, it feeds so much, especially in OT cyber, because we're not doing things like actively scanning for vulnerabilities, right? But we can query, we have firmware versions to determine, hey, are there any vulnerabilities in this system or not, right? Or if you bring in like a Mandiant or a Dragos to help you with incident response, if you're having some type of significant incident, right? The first thing they're going to ask for is your asset register. And if you don't have that, you're going to have to sit there and explain to them the environment, which takes hours or days. And that's time you need for response. So yeah, then we get into the secure network architecture, right? Everything from having that firewall between IT and OT and further segmentation and other controls and within the OT network, right? Slow down the attacker or keep them out completely, right? And then when we look at incident response planning, which is a big, I think a lot of companies get a big F in incident response. And it's just not doing tabletops, but I think most organizations, if they took the time, even it's like 5 minutes a week, just to look at what's going on in the outside world, and saying, hey, this, happened over here, right? Could this happen to us? And if so, what can we do to protect ourselves? And if they did that, they would be so much better off. But there's so many cases where a port or a pipeline or, gets hit. And it's like, well, yeah, the same thing happened to this other company like 3 months ago and it was all over the news, but you weren't paying attention apparently, and so we would be so much better off. And then I'm a big vulnerability management person. So continuous vulnerability management, just understanding what's in the environment. And of course, OT is very different in how we do vulnerability management in IT, but it's still, we still have to understand what's there, meet with the right people like engineers and people in operations to understand, hey, is this something we need to do something about or not? Right. And it's still weird saying like, we have this really bad vulnerability, but we're not going to do anything about it. So I still cringe a little bit, even though I've been doing this for almost 15 years at this point. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I remember having going to a site, doing an assessment, and there being Stuxnet in the environment, and we made a decision that it wasn't a risk because there was no Siemens equipment on site. So yes, it existed in the world, but there was no way that the payload could impact anything. Now, we knew we were going to change it eventually, but we were going to wait till an outage and we'd fix that thing. Like we'd bring in the vendor and all that kind of stuff. But it's just weird to say I left Stuxnet in an OT environment and didn't do anything about it. Day one. I mean, I did something about it, but it wasn't like stop the plant. Like we're, bring in the black helicopters and helicopter in and all the things. Cause it just, that's really getting to understand what the risk is. And exactly.
If it's not going to impact safety, if it's not going to impact operations, well, I really don't care. It's weird still to say that, but it's true.
It is. Well, and, a couple other things you hit on, I want to double down on. Like, I remember being an asset owner. So, I came from, I've been in technology for 30 years, but half of my career has been spent in OT, the operation side, critical infrastructure, whatever you want to call it. Way before we called it OT, it was not that, right? But I was working at a power plant, right? Or a power company. And I had zero budget to go to a conference or take a training or do any of those types of things, right? Yeah. So the irony of the SANS $10,000 course or, and to your point, I know it's worth it. I know those things are value add, but I built a team of 6 and I had to fight to get a very small budget for training and, all that kind of stuff. And it definitely wasn't going to be $10,000 per person. There's no way that would happen. But maybe 2,000 or 3,000. So we went to, other like, CEH classes, certified ethical hacking classes. And, we go to, Schneider or Foxborough or Emerson or GE training and different things like that. And go to Black Hat and some of those other places. But, it was just a matter of there was no way I could send my team. We just didn't have the budget for those things and the space I'm at. And my group was probably the ones that should have been doing those things, that should have been in those classes, because we were frontline doing those things and again, a lot of this was before any of this, like Dragos didn't exist when I'm starting this conversation, right? That none of those OT products even existed. So there wasn't an S4, but even that, just going in and getting those next level training so that we can stay on the leading edge of constant continuing improvement and education and all that kind of stuff is what we should be thinking about from all of these things, whether you're IT or OT, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm just seeing a lot of organizations and they'll put a lot of training into IT cybersecurity sometimes, but there's very little that goes to the OT, just like in general, right? With, 95% of security budgets go to IT, yeah, and you might be lucky and have 5% go over to OT. Yeah, and that's changing slightly, but we still have a long way to go. Yeah, for sure.
Well, the irony of that is, when I was doing this, and again, this is before OT existed, when I first started this track of OT cybersecurity stuff that became OT cybersecurity stuff, we didn't have budget, right? So I was going to the plant saying, hey, this new outage you're doing, control system upgrade with, blah, 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 blah. I have to add $300,000 to do this cybersecurity stuff. And you're going to have to take that out of boiler feed pump maintenance or whatever the thing is that you're doing. But when I was able to tie those things, so a lot of the things in your critical, controls that you just talked about, right? A lot of those things help the business, even if you don't align it to cyber. By having a backup and recovery, it doesn't have to be a cyber incident that brings them down. Nope. If they have a fire and they need to be able to recover, that backup and recovery helps.
Equipment goes on the fritz, right? I mean, it's electrical equipment. Stuff happens.
Correct.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I try to position pretty much just about anything we do for security in the OT world it's all about operations first. I'm going to help you keep up the plant, right? You think we can deploy network security monitoring. You're going to find 99.999% of the time, you're finding operational issues. You're not finding an attacker in the environment. So yeah, let's help you keep the plant up and running, keep everybody safe. And by the way, we do get cybersecurity out of it, but honestly, it's not the main focus. And like you mentioned, all of those controls, it's really about ensuring safety, keep the plant up and running. And by the way, it helps us stay secure.
Correct. Well, and the funny thing is one of the first plants we turned on, we did this massive architecture and we're doing spans on every switch and east-west and we're capturing every packet and we're Splunk and we got Forescout, NAC environments and all the things that are going on. We spin it up in the first power plant, and we're monitoring as soon as it comes up. The first log, we're like watching the logs. It's like all of us sitting around this little screen. And the first thing that came up is there was a switch that was part of the control system, and it was everything redundant. It was I think it was a Foxborough control system. Had redundant switches all up and down the whole stack. Everything was multiple redundancies. And one switch of the core switches was not, and it was the backup. So the primary, it was running, no problems, but the backup, which was their redundancy, was offline and nobody knew it. So we started, and it was screaming logs that it had a problem. We walked over to the switch and there was a zip tie stuck in the fan. So it was overheating. So we removed the zip tie and the switch spun back up, right? And it was like, oh my God, we just solved an operational problem with all these tools that we brought in. And it was a stupid problem, but nobody had noticed it. Who knows how long that zip tie had been sitting there because somebody was doing something else in the cabinet and it just happened to fall into the fan of the switch and it was overheating.
Yeah, we had one instance, where it was a PLC was starting to overheat because it was in a cabinet that the vents were all clogged with dust. And so eventually, 5-10 years goes by and the only way they actually caught it was, with the monitoring platform and, where you would normally have the HMI query, the PLC, like once every, 30 seconds. And then all of a sudden it was checking every second. And it's like, well, let's do what's going on. It's like, well, it was programmed that if the PLC starts to overheat, then it would start querying every second. So apparently somebody missed the whole I need to program an alarm for when the PLC is overheating, right? To let an operator know that, hey, they need to, come check on this, right? Clean out the vents. But yeah, it's for sure. We find those operational issues that, could result in downtime, safety issues, and we'll get those fixed. And oh, by the way, we get security out of this. So.
It's kind of a byproduct, and as it's all about the messaging that we do as we go forth as security, practitioners, as we go to the plant managers or whomever it is that has the budget, whether it's the CEO, the CISO, or the plant manager or the operations folks. It's all around messaging and making sure they understand what we're trying to come forth. Because we could put on the lens of, or the hat of the cybersecurity guy or the hat of the financial guy. How can it make it more efficient? How can we help with downtime? How can we help with safety? How can we help with, what is the thing that the person that's sitting across from you cares about? And how is the things that we're bringing, how can the things that we're talking about help them with the things they care about? Because if you talk about things they don't care about, it's in one ear and out the other. And it doesn't help me whatsoever. Right. So it's really
right.
Understand and being intelligent enough to know what the things they care about are, or just freaking ask them.
Yeah. And it really comes down to, keeping plants up and running, keeping, people safe. And ultimately, and one of the things that I think was new to me in OT was so many owners, are really focused on ensuring the trust of their customers. If I have power, I don't want a bad name because we have blackouts, every 6 months. Right. Or if I'm a water provider that, I don't want to have a bad name by, having, water outages or, dirty water going out to clients, those or customers, that type of thing. And it didn't really have that necessarily. You have that, yes, in the IT world, but it's just very different in OT for sure.
Yeah. So talk to me about the BSides. How did BSides ICS come about? And it goes along this kind of path I've seen of you giving back, you reaching out. And again, I wish something like that existed when I was starting out in OT cyber and I didn't have budget to go to SANS and I was looking for a place for my team. Like I understood it more, but some of my team they came from IT or they came from operations and they had zero coverage of any of this type of stuff and didn't know how A plus B equals C, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I've always loved BSides. BSides, for those who aren't aware, it's basically it started as an IT cybersecurity conference and really didn't even start as a conference. It was a bunch of folks that they got denied at Black Hat or DEF CON, which are the largest, DEF CON is the largest hacker conference in the world in Vegas every August. And right before that, now they have Black Hat, which is more the professional vendor side and
sales guy.
And so you had a bunch of folks that, and we're pretty big in the community at the time said, hey, I got denied. This sucks, but I'm excited. I really still want to talk about this stuff. So a bunch got together at a bar pretty much across the street from DEF CON. And that was the first BSides, just hanging out and talking about what they wanted to talk about. And so it's just grown up to where I think last year they had 140 IT BSides events around the world, which is just amazing.
Wow.
I started the one here in Greenville. Yeah, I started the one here in Greenville 9 years ago. And I just had to step down last year because of BSides ICS really taking off. And so, we started the first one, not this year, but last year. So 2025. And it was really, it started. In fact, I told this story at S4 in front of Dale Peterson that runs S4 on the unsolicited stage because, I had submitted for a couple of years to go to S4 and I kept, getting rejected. And then one day it just clicked. I'm like, you know what? DEF CON BSides started, out of DEF CON because of, rejected papers. And I was like, and we don't really have anything like this for ICS. And I was like, why don't we? And so the first person I pinged was Rob Lee. And he's like, F yeah. Everybody knows. Yeah, right. He's like, yeah, you have to do this. He's like, oh, we'll be there. We'll help you with whatever you need. Right. And I was like, awesome. And, I talked to one or two others and they were like, yes, you have to do this. I only met one person that was kind of like, because they were worried, I think, about what Dale was going to think. And because we have BSides the day before S4. And like you mentioned, like S4 is a great conference, right? But it's like $2,100 or whatever it is to go. And not everybody has that type of, money. Our tickets are $40, dollars, and it's half if you're a student or active military veteran. And we put, because of our sponsors, we're very lucky. I think we put like $130 per person into the conference this year, right? All the money goes into the conference. And so it was just really amazing. We had another great lineup. Last year we had 200 people, a little over 200. We had like 120 on the wait list. This year, we had over 400 people signed up. I think we had a little bit over probably 300 because of all the weather, crazy mishaps this year. It was like 50 degrees in Miami, which is a little crazy.
It was cold. We were outside.
Yeah. Yeah. People were too happy with that. So I'm sorry. I mean, it's like,
can't control the weather.
But we started it last year, I think, and it's grown. I'm going to England next week. We have our first international one in Bristol.
Awesome.
So the NCSE, I think the kind of the UK version of CISA had seen what we had done, and they had contacts at the University of Bristol, and they were like, "Hey, look what the Americans did. You have to do one of those." Right. And then Bruce Large is spinning one up in Australia called BSides ICS Down Under. So that's really cool. And we have one in Singapore in October. And then there's folks looking at like Belgium, Mexico City, Rio. We talked with folks about some cities in India and a couple other countries, which is really, really, really exciting. So yeah, it'll be kind of cool to go there. Actually, it's this Friday, the one in Bristol. So I'm really excited.
That's right.
To go and see. And then of course, my girlfriend, her best friend's in London. So that doesn't hurt. So she's going to, of course. So but yeah, I'm really excited.
That's awesome, man. I mean, I love seeing the growth. I love seeing the passion. It's clear to see with you, but it's also like all the volunteers that are there, everybody that's there in general, the students that are there, just hungry to learn and grow and listen to the talks. And, obviously there's some sponsors there, but even the sponsors that are there, like I'm there with ICS Village. I'm helping with you. Like I don't care. Right. I put on a shirt and I was taking registrations and I was handing out the badges and like whatever.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, I mean, there's folks like you. I think Sasha last year, Najo was there this year. Sam Ryder's been there. Van Ryder's been there the last 2 years, and you're all everybody's just always just put us in where you need us, coach.
Wherever we need to be. You tell us where to go.
Yeah, I always feel bad, and I'm like, I don't want to use you and abuse you, but everybody's like, no, use us and abuse us.
Absolutely. Well, again, I think it's from what we talked about in the beginning of this conversation. Like as we see the big picture, I'm passionate about this. Like I love OT. I think it's hugely important. I feel it is a calling, and I think it's vastly important on humankind to do this well around the world and teach others to do this in a safe and reliable and respectable way, right? And things like this help that. Because again, as I said, like my team at the Power Utility, we didn't have budget. Even if I could afford one ticket to S4, Miami's expensive and the hotels are expensive and the food's expensive and the flights are expensive.
Crazy.
And, like all those things just add up, and a $2,000 ticket turns into $5,000 of expenses. It's just like, I don't know if I can afford that, right?
Yeah. It's one of those that a lot of folks face. And so that's why, you have so many vendors there, and you get some owners and operators and a few engineers, which is awesome. Yep. But you're leaving so many people out. So that's why, I really, BSides is much more approachable. Right. And we're not taking anybody away from S4. If anything, there's probably people coming to BSides today that will, start going to S4 in the future.
Correct.
Yeah, there's just so many people that again goes back to education and awareness, right? And we need to get that out there. And it's just hard, for those folks that just don't have those resources. Yeah, they can't go to those conferences or they can't go to those trainings. So, well, that's why we have BSides, and that's why we have YouTube and LinkedIn, and so we'll take advantage of all of those as much as possible to get the word out, for sure.
Well, and it's also that chicken and egg conversation, right? It's the how do you get into OT unless you're in OT? Like it's that. I think you posted something the other day, like OT is not an entry level position. It really isn't, right? You really have to have understanding and all this type of stuff. But how do you get that experience unless you've it's that roundabout of how do I get into this space?
Yeah, for sure. And I get it. I'm like, I've been there, right? And there's, folks that either come from OT or IC, or, they're engineers or they work in operations, right? PLC techs, and they want to get into it. So they, need to learn things like networking and the basics of cybersecurity. And if you're coming like myself from IT and IT cyber, right? You have to learn what the heck a PLC is and an HMI and, what are all of these things and how physics actually works, Yep. It's very, it's very different, but yeah, you just can't jump in. I feel bad because like people reach out to me on LinkedIn every single day and they're very excited and they want to do it. And I'm like, that's awesome. I just want to set expectations. And that was the reason for that post is like, you either need the IT and the IT cyber basics, and then you can start to learn the engineering side, or you need to be an engineer or kind of in the operations world and then start learning the IT and the cybersecurity basics. And then those come together to then become, to give you a firm foundation for OT cybersecurity. But there's no shortcuts. You can't go from high school to just being a doctor. You have to go to med school, and you have to, and I wouldn't want anybody in a power plant, that hadn't, at least had, right, the foundations, at least from both sides, or, somebody at least looking over their shoulders and helping them along the path. So, and once one person said, "Oh, well, you're just a gatekeeper and you don't want people." I'm like, wait a minute. I'm the last person to be called a OT ICS gatekeeper. I'm just trying to, set, again, realistic expectations. Cause, someone's like, yeah, it's also weird. I get a lot of parents that reach out for their, my son or my daughter wants to do this. I'm like, okay, they're probably old enough where they should be reaching out.
Right.
But, so they're probably not really interested, but their parents are. But it's like, I'll humor you, right? But it's like, yeah, it's not it just doesn't happen overnight, so it does take time. So again, just trying to set expectations.
Well, and it's not something, and so much today is this way, but specifically OT, it's not something I can just even SANS. So if I could afford a SANS course and I could go take Rob's SANS course and Don's SANS course and whomever's, I could take 3 or 4 SANS courses. Having those certifications is still probably not, well, I know, but not probably. It is definitely not enough to probably land me a job in OT, right? It's not I can go get a certification and check, I'm good now.
Yeah, OT is not really it's not like IT, right? Where you can go, get a certification and at least it would help you get a job. I mean, it can help you, but I see a lot of times more people, especially like the engineers I used to work with, or like myself, like when I went to get the ISA courses, it was because it was required by a client. It was one of the largest companies in the world, big gas company, oil and gas. And they wanted you to see on paper that you have these qualifications to run things like, 62443 risk assessments. So I was like, okay, I'll go, that's how I ended up taking those. So I think it's a lot of people take them, at least if they're in the OT world, they take them to show expertise, to demonstrate, because a client's requesting it more than anything. It's not going to help them get a job or a different role somewhere else. And it's same thing for other folks. Now, I would say that it does help. Let's say if you're looking for kind of like that first entry level role in OT, it's like one of those things that shows, it demonstrates, right? You have the passion, right? And then you went and you learned and you took the test where a lot of other people didn't do that. So like whether it's SANS or ISA, and I'm really excited, with CompTIA and the SecOT Plus exam coming out. It launches, officially in November. The beta launches in early summer. So we're almost there. And I'm really excited because, that's a 450 exam that you can go
Correct.
and, you can self-study. I'm actually helping CompTIA write their official course that they do online. So I'm really excited about that, because I think it's one of those, because again, most people, I think they want those certs, but it's because they want to make that transition. Again, whether they're coming from OT or IT, and IT cyber, they want to make that transition. They want something that shows, hey, I have a base level of knowledge.
Yep.
I might not have practical experience yet, but I'm just trying to get my foot in the door. And so it's like, hey, right, here is a way you can do that at a much more affordable rate than these other options. So yeah, I'm really, really excited about it.
That's awesome. So where all can people, I mean, you kind of mentioned it before, but where all can people dive into your courses, go to a BSides, take your training, see you at conferences? What is that call to action for you, Mike? Obviously be in London this week.
Yeah, I'll be in London, through Friday, and then we're going to Paris. So see me on the streets and say hi. We're doing the tourist thing. So we've never been to Paris before, so I'm really excited.
Right. Yeah, that's cool.
But yeah. So, everything's at MikeHolcomb.com. So there's pointers to everything, whether it's LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out and connect. Of course, YouTube, you can look for Mike Holcomb, or Utilsec is the name of my company, which is the channel name right now. And that's where you can find my course. I think I have 4 different full courses out there, and I'm just about to relaunch, as soon as I'm back, the updated version of the Getting Started in OT ICS Cybersecurity course will start. So I'm really, really excited about that. So it's all, because that original class is like 2.5 years old. So it's all very valid. But even the first parts were recorded with my laptop microphone. Come a long way.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so my girlfriend got me a really nice podcaster mic for Christmas. Yeah, so, but yeah, that's YouTube. And then I have a newsletter, so that's actually the best place to get the updates. But folks can sign up, and you can see it on my LinkedIn profile. So those are all the places, and feel free to reach out at MikeHolcomb.com. And I definitely respond to everybody on LinkedIn. Messages do back up a little bit because I spend probably about an hour a day responding to people. It's crazy. So, and emails there, but, that's where everybody can find me. But most of the resources are on MikeHolcomb.com, including all my infographics that I, post on LinkedIn as well. They're just there, in one place for everybody. Thanks to my girlfriend.
Sure. Good job to her.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks, man. It is
Thanks,
awesome
sir.
to be part of this or this group and OT and the larger community. And I see the success and when folks come in and because of folks like you, because of your willingness to respond to all those people on LinkedIn, even the moms that are saying, hey, my son's interested, like that. Right. It just goes to show the type of person that you are and the type of community this is and how important it is to you that you're willing to spend that. And I appreciate that. And that's why, I love this this OT group and the larger community of OT, because there's so many folks like you in this space. And I am appreciative. I'm very, very proud to be part of BSides and handing out registrations or whatever I can
having
do.
You there.
And love, just, great to be connected with you and friend with you, all the things. So thank you for your time and best of luck with all the BSides things and the training and all that is. Everybody, please definitely reach out to Mike, take his trainings, reach out to him on LinkedIn, go see him, go to the BSides, think about having a BSides in your city, your country, or wherever. If there isn't one, reach out to Mike. I'm sure he'd be happy to have a conversation if there's not already one, or he'll connect you with the one that's already on the books and coming up in that space. Anything to close out, Mike?
Thanks, Aaron. It was good to see you and catch up. Thanks, everybody. Right. So, but definitely reach out anytime, for sure.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks for joining us on Protect It All, where we explore the crossroads of IT and OT cybersecurity. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to stay ahead in this ever-evolving field. Until next time.